The door opened, and she flew out of it. Not gently, not with any of the grace he had always carried in that house. Juliana hit the cold night air of the estate courtyard with nothing but the bag in her hand, and the child growing inside her, and the sound of his voice still burning in her ears. "Get out!" That was all he had said. She turned around. The door was already closing. Sung Jin. Her voice did not shake. She had decided it would not shake. "Look at me." He stopped with his hand on the door. He did not turn around. She said, "I am carrying your children. Not a secret. Not a problem. Your children. And you are sending me into the rain." The courtyard was silent, except for the rain hitting the stone. He said, without turning, "There will be money. There will be arrangements." She said, "I do not want your money." He said, "Juliana," she said, "say it to my face. If you are going to do this, say it to my face." He turned around, and she saw it. Not cruelty. That would have been easier. She saw fear. Pure, complete, consuming fear, wearing the face of the most powerful man in Gangnam. She looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up her bag. She walked through the gate. She did not look back. 5 years later, his gate opened again, and 2 children were standing in the rain, with his eyes. If you are new here, please hit the subscribe button right now, and drop a comment below telling us where you are watching from. This story is one you need to stay for from the very first second to the very last. Also, if stories like this make your heart race, I have something special for you. The Ultimate Mafia Boss Love Collection brings together 15 unforgettable Afro-Korean romance stories, 20 audiobook versions, and 5 exclusive bonus stories not available on YouTube, but only through the collection. Click the link below if you'd like hours of romance waiting for you anytime. Now, let's get into today's story. Park Sung-jin was 38 years old. He had inherited leadership of one of Seoul's most quietly feared criminal organizations at 26, when his father died of a heart attack at the dinner table in front of 6 associates, and nobody at that table called an ambulance for 7 minutes, because nobody wanted to make the wrong move without knowing who was in charge. Park Sung-jin had been the one to finally reach for the phone. He had been the one to speak calmly through the chaos, and every person at that table had looked at him afterward with a new calculation in their eyes. He had been terrifying ever since. Not in the way of men who shout, not in the way of men who make dramatic gestures. Park Sung-jin was terrifying in the way of men who say very little and mean every word they say. He had eyes that looked at people the way accountants look at numbers, always adding, always finding the discrepancy, always arriving at an answer that no one else had reached yet. His organization controlled certain import and distribution arrangements that moved through several ports in South Korea. This is the polite way to say what it was. Everyone in the relevant circles understood what it was. And everyone in the relevant circles understood that Park Sung-jin did not tolerate mistakes, did not tolerate disloyalty, and did not tolerate any complication that threatened the stability of what he had spent 12 years refining. He lived alone in the Gangnam estate. He had no wife, no children, no family left beyond an elderly aunt in Busan who sent him fish cake at Chuseok every year and asked in her card when he was going to get married, and he threw the card away every year without replying. His world was work. His world was structure. His world was the knowledge that everything was where he had placed it. He liked things where he had placed them, which is what made what happened 5 years ago so difficult, because he had not placed her there. Her name was Juliana Williams. She had come to work at the estate as part of a household staff rotation, hired through a private agency that supplied domestic workers to high-end properties across Seoul. She was Nigerian, 24 years old at the time, quiet in the way of someone who had learned early that watching was safer than speaking. She had been in Korea for 2 years before she arrived at the estate. She spoke Korean well enough to navigate the household instructions. She learned quickly. She made no trouble. Park Sung-jin did not notice her for the first 3 months. This was not unusual. He did not notice most of his domestic staff. They were background, functional, invisible in the way that furniture was invisible. He noticed them when something was wrong, when something was missing, when something was not where he had placed it. He did not notice them when everything was correct. She was always correct. And then one night, in late autumn, Park Sung-jin could not sleep, which was not unusual, and went to the kitchen to find something to eat, which was unusual, because he did not usually permit himself the small indulgence of wandering his own house at odd hours. There was something undignified about it, something that reminded him of the hollow middle-of-the-night feeling he had as a boy, that he had worked very hard to outgrow. Juliana was in the kitchen. She was not supposed to be there. Staff hours ended at 10. It was past midnight. But she was sitting at the kitchen table with a small notebook and a glass of water, and she was writing something in a language he did not recognize. And she looked up when he walked in, with an expression so completely unafraid that he stopped moving for a second. Most people startled when he appeared unexpectedly. It was one of the consistent small satisfactions of his life. She did not startle. She looked at him the way you look at someone who has arrived exactly when you expected them to, even when you did not know you expected them. He said in Korean, "What are you doing here?" She said, in Korean, "I could not sleep either." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he went to the refrigerator and found the rice his cook had left covered and set it on the stove to reheat, and did not ask her to leave. She did not leave. They sat in the kitchen in a silence that was not uncomfortable, which was the strangest part, because Park Sung-jin was not a man who experienced comfortable silences with anyone. Silences with him were usually charged, usually careful, usually the silence of people watching what they said. This was not that kind of silence. He asked her what she was writing. She told him she was writing a letter to her younger sister in Lagos. She sent one every 2 weeks. Her sister was in secondary school and struggled with mathematics, and Juliana always included problems she had worked out herself as examples, alongside the letter, because she believed understanding the steps mattered more than being given the answers. Park Sung-jin looked at her and said nothing. Then he said, "Does it work?" She said, "She went from bottom of the class to third. So probably." He ate his rice. She finished her letter. He asked her once about Lagos, and she answered carefully, the way people answer when they are not sure how much of their real life is welcome in a conversation. He listened without interrupting. She noticed that he listened the way very few people listened, completely, without already forming his response while she was still talking. She noticed a lot of things about him that she probably should not have noticed. This is how it began. Not with drama, not with any single moment, but with a kitchen, a bowl of rice, a letter to a sister in Lagos, and 2 people who could not sleep in the same house, on the same night, in the same autumn. Over the following months, it became something. Neither of them named it. In Park Sung-jin's world, naming things gave them power, and he was careful about what he gave power to. In Juliana's world, some things were better carried quietly until they became strong enough to stand on their own. She would be the first to admit, later, much later, that she knew the risk. She was not naive about what he was. She had worked in this house long enough to understand the shape of it, the men who came and went with hard faces, the phone calls that happened behind closed doors, the way the entire household adjusted its rhythm when he was in a difficult mood, the way weather adjusts to a coming storm. She knew, and she stayed, not because she was foolish, but because she had also seen the other thing, the man who came to the kitchen at midnight because he could not sleep, the man who listened without interrupting, the man who, One evening when he found her sitting on the steps of the East Garden reading a book, sat down next to her without asking permission, and read his own documents in silence beside her for 40 minutes, as if that was a completely ordinary thing to do. She had also seen the moment, one morning very early, when he found a bird that had hit the window and was lying stunned on the terrace. He had stood over it for 3 full minutes. He had not touched it. He had not called anyone. He had simply watched it, waiting. When it finally stood up and flew away, the expression on his face had lasted only a second before he composed it back into nothing. But she had seen it. He had looked relieved. That was the man she fell in love with. Which does not mean the other man was not also real. He was. Both were. When she became pregnant, she did not know for certain at first. And then she did. And she sat with it for 2 weeks before she said anything to anyone, because she needed to understand what she felt before she faced what he would feel. What she felt, once she understood it fully, was this. It was terrifying. It was enormous. And underneath the terror and the enormity was something that she could only describe as certain. Like the letters she sent to her sister every 2 weeks. Like the steps she always included. She believed in what was there. She believed in understanding things, rather than being given the answers. She told him on a Thursday evening. She asked to speak to him privately, which was unusual enough that he looked at her carefully when she made the request. He agreed. They met in his office. He was sitting. She was standing. And she told him the truth, in clear and simple language, because she had decided that simple and clear was the only way she knew how to do this. The room went very quiet. She watched his face. She had hoped to see the man from the kitchen at midnight, the man who listened without interrupting, the man who watched the bird fly away with relief on his face. Instead, she saw a different man. His expression did not collapse. It hardened, the way stone hardens. Not in anger, not at first, in something colder, something that looked like calculation, like a problem being solved in real time. He said, "How long have you known?" She told him. He said nothing for a full minute. She counted. 1 minute exactly. Then he said, "You should have told me immediately." She said, "I needed to understand it myself first." He said, "This is not how things work." She said, "I know." He said, "You understand what my life is, what this means for my position." And she looked at him with those eyes that missed nothing, and she said, very quietly, "I understand what you are afraid of. But I am telling you, there is a person growing. I am telling you that because I thought you should know. Not because I am making demands, not because I am threatening anything. I am telling you because it is the truth, and I thought you deserved it." He stood up. He walked to the window. The same window he always walked to when he needed to compose something in his mind before it showed on his face. He stood there for a long time, and when he turned around, the man from the kitchen was gone. Completely gone. What stood in that office was the man his father had built. The man 12 years of this life had reinforced. The man who had learned that the only things that could not hurt you were the things you did not let inside. He said, "You need to leave the estate." She said, "I see." He said, "I will arrange severance. I will arrange for you to be moved to a different city. There will be support." She said, "I do not want your support." He said, "Juliana." And the way he said her name, the way he always said her name, with a care that could not quite disguise itself, almost broke through. Almost. Almost is a very hard word to live with when you are standing in front of a man who is choosing fear over everything. She said, "Will you at least acknowledge what you are doing?" He said, "I am protecting both of us." She said, "No." Her voice was still quiet, still clear. "You are protecting yourself. That is your right. But I want you to say it plainly. Say it plainly so that I can hear you say it, and you can hear yourself say it." The room was very still. He said nothing. She nodded once. She picked up the small bag she had brought with her. She walked to the door of his office, and she stopped with her hand on the frame, and she looked back at him one final time. She said, "I hope you sleep better than I think you will." Then she was gone. She was in her room packing for less than 20 minutes. Ha-Jin came to escort her, which was his job, and he did not look at her directly the entire time, which told her everything about how the instruction had been given and how much room there was to question it. None. It was raining that night. The same kind of cold November rain that was falling tonight, 5 years later, when the twins appeared at the gate. One of the junior guards drove her to a bus terminal 40 minutes away. He left the engine running while she climbed out. He did not wait to see her go inside. She stood in the rain for a moment outside the bus terminal. Her bag was not large. She had not taken much, because most of what she had been given in that house, she did not want to carry. She looked at the sky. Then she walked inside. And that, for 5 long years, was where the story of Park Sung-jin and Juliana Williams was supposed to end. Supposed to. The east sitting room of the Park estate was smaller than the main receiving rooms, and that was the only thing small about it. The furniture was heavy and expensive, chosen by someone who understood that comfort and authority were not the same thing, and that a sitting room could communicate both without trying. The walls held 2 paintings, a landscape and something abstract. Neither of them invited you to feel at home exactly. They invited you to understand that you were somewhere significant. The twins sat on the sofa. They sat with their backs straight and their hands in their laps and their eyes moving around the room with a slow, methodical attention that was so unusual in children that the young guard who had been posted just outside the open door kept glancing in because he could not help himself. He had younger siblings. He knew what 5-year-olds looked like in an unfamiliar room. They fidgeted. They reached for things. They asked questions in loud voices without waiting for answers. They were noise and movement and curiosity with no off switch. These two were completely still. A woman from the kitchen staff had brought 2 cups of warm barley tea and a small plate of rice crackers and set them on the table in front of the children and retreated quickly. The girl reached for her cup with both hands, the way Korean children were taught to receive things from adults. The boy waited until she had hers before reaching for his own. He was looking at the painting of the landscape. The guard outside the door noticed this. Noticed the boy's eyes moving across the painting methodically, the way someone reads a page, left to right, line by line. Not like a child admiring a picture, like someone cataloging information. Then the boy spoke. He did not speak to the guard. He spoke to his sister. He said something in a low voice, and his sister tilted her head and responded, and they had a quiet exchange that the guard, whose Korean was the only language he knew, could not follow because the children were not speaking Korean. They were not speaking English either. Whatever language it was familiar between them. Comfortable, fast, like breathing. Then the boy switched back to Korean, completely and without any transition, and looked at the guard in the doorway and said politely, "When will he come?" The guard blinked. "Soon." The boy nodded. He picked up his tea. He drank it in small, careful sips. The guard outside the door thought, for a reason he could not fully explain, that he felt more observed than the children did. Park Sung-jin arrived 12 minutes later. He did not rush. He had learned long ago that the pace at which a man enters a room communicates his understanding of who controls it. He walked at his own pace. He wore dark trousers and a plain dark shirt, what he had been working in, because changing would have communicated something he did not want to communicate. He came as he was. He stopped in the doorway and looked at them. The girl saw him first. Her eyes went to his face, and then did something complicated. Not fear, not relief. Something that was trying to be neither, but contained both. She pressed her shoulder against her brother's, without looking at him. A small, involuntary movement. He's here. The boy turned. And Park Sung-jin, who had spent 12 years building a face that showed nothing, felt the world tilt. Because the boy's eyes were his. Not similar. Not reminiscent. Not the kind of resemblance you argue about over a dinner table while someone says you cannot tell these things for certain. Identical. The exact shape. The exact stillness. The exact way they moved, measuring everything without hurrying. He was looking at himself at 5 years old, and he had never in his life felt less prepared for anything. He walked into the room. He sat in the chair across from them. He did not reach for them. He did not perform warmth he had not earned. He looked at them the way he looked at everything he needed to understand. He said, in Korean, "What are your names?" The boy said, "I am Ji-won. She is Seong-min." Korean names. That surprised him. He said, "Who named you?" Ji-won said, "Our mother." He said, "Where is your mother?" "She is waiting," Ji-won said. "We asked her to wait. We said we wanted to come first." Park said, "You asked her to wait." Ji-won said, "Yes." Park looked at Song-min. She had not spoken yet. She was watching him with an expression that was harder to read than her brother's. Less careful. More something else. He could not name it immediately, and he was a man who named things quickly. He said to Song-min, "And you agreed to come first?" Song-min said, "It was my idea." He looked at her again. She did not flinch under it. He said, "Whose idea was it to come to this address?" Ji-won and Song-min looked at each other for a fraction of a second. Then Song-min said, "Both of us." He said, "How did you know this address?" A small pause. Ji-won said, "We looked." He said, "You are 5 years old." Ji-won said, "We are 6. Park said, "You are 6 years old and you looked up this address." Ji-won said, "Our mother does not know we had this address. We found it ourselves. She thinks we found this neighborhood by following a different lead. We did not correct her." Park Sung-jin stared at his 6-year-old son who had just casually admitted to a small operational deception with the composure of a mid-level manager reporting a workflow adjustment. He said, "You are saying you hid information from your mother." Ji-won said, "We protected her from a decision she might have changed her mind about." The silence that followed had a weight to it. And then, because there was nothing else appropriate, Park Sung-jin said, "Where did she think you were leading her tonight?" Seong-min said, "To a community center in this area, where we heard a man matching your description, sometimes donated resources. We told her we wanted to see it. She agreed to bring us and wait outside," Park said. "And instead you came here. We made a small turn," Ji-won confirmed. Another silence. Park said, very carefully, "And you do not think your mother will be concerned about the small turn?" Seong-min said, "We told Ha-jin at the gate to call her and tell her where we are. We said to say we are safe and with the correct person, and she should come when she is ready." Ha-jin had not told him this. He was going to have a conversation with Ha-jin. He looked at these two children. These 6-year-old twins who had researched his address, planned a route, coordinated a cover story for their mother, briefed the security staff at his gate, and were now sitting in his east sitting room, drinking his barley tea with straight backs and hands in their laps, answering his questions like they had done this before. He said slowly, "How long have you been planning to come here?" Ji-won said, "A year and 4 months." Song-min said, "I wanted to come sooner. He said we needed more information first." Ji-won said, "We needed more information first." Song-min tilted her head. "We had enough at 11 months." Ji-won said, "We did not know about the east entrance at 11 months." Seong-min said, "The east entrance was not necessary." Ji-won said, "It was a contingency." Seong-min turned to Park Sung-jin. and said with complete sincerity, "He is very thorough. It is sometimes a problem." Park Sung-jin sat back in his chair. He had interrogated grown men, hardened men, men who had every reason not to cooperate, and years of practice doing exactly that. He had never in his life felt as outmaneuvered as he felt right now, sitting across from a 6-year-old girl who had just critiqued her brother's operational pacing with the energy of a senior partner reviewing a junior's report. He said, "What did you come here to find out?" Ji-won said, "We came to understand why you left." Seong-min added, "And to decide what kind of person you are." He said, "To decide." Seong-min said, "Yes. Our mother taught us that you do not accept other people's verdicts about someone. You gather your own information. Then you decide." He said, "And what information have you gathered so far?" Song-min looked around the room. "This house is very large. For one person. The guards are well trained. But the one outside this door has been looking at us for 20 minutes, and he is nervous. The paintings in this room were not chosen by you. Probably your mother," Park said. "What makes you think that?" Seong-min said, "The landscape is sentimental. The other one is trying too hard. They do not go together, and they would not go together if the same person chose both. So someone chose one and someone else chose the other. And neither person argued about it because one of them is gone." He looked at her for a very long time. He said, "My mother died 9 years ago." Seong-min said, "I am sorry." She said it the way her mother always said things. Simply, without decorating it. Because it was true, and the truth did not need decoration. He said, "You sound like her," Song-min said. "You knew our mother well enough to hear her in someone else." That was not a question. He did not answer it. He stood and walked to the window again. His old habit. His old way of buying himself a moment when something had reached him. He stood looking at the wet grounds of the estate, and he thought about the last 5 years. He thought about the night she had left. He thought about the weeks that followed, when he had told himself it was better, it was cleaner, it was the correct decision. He thought about the reports he had eventually commissioned, quietly, through channels that could not be traced back to him, just to confirm she was safe. The reports had come back with an address in Incheon. Then later, nothing. She had moved, and the trail had gone cold, and he had told himself that was also fine. That was also better. He thought about the nights he could not sleep. He had a lot of those now. He turned back around. Ji-won had finished his tea. Song-min was eating a rice cracker with the focused attention of someone who had skipped a meal. He realized they had probably been outside in the cold for a long time before the guard finally opened the gate. He said, "When did you last eat?" Song-min said without looking up from the cracker. "Lunch," he said. "It is almost 1 in the morning." Ji-won said, "We had a busy evening." He went to the door and spoke quietly to the guard and told him to bring proper food. Not crackers. Something warm. The guard moved immediately. He came back in and sat down. He said, "Tell me about your life. And this is where it gets good, besties, so stay close." Because the story these twins told was not what he expected. And nothing about the next hour in that sitting room was what Park Sung-jin had prepared himself for. Ji-won spoke first. He spoke carefully, in the organized way of someone who had thought about this conversation and prepared for it. The way you prepare for something important and cannot quite decide if you are more ready or more afraid. He said that after their mother left Seoul, she had found her way to Incheon with the help of a woman she had met at the bus terminal that first night. A woman named Hyeja, who ran a small guest house near the waterfront, and who had looked at a pregnant young woman standing in the rain outside a bus terminal at midnight, and had not asked any questions. Only one. She had said, "Do you have somewhere to go?" And when the answer was no, she had said, "Come." Hyeja, Ji-won explained, had become the first person outside their mother who they called family. She was Korean, in her 60s, and she had strong opinions about fermented vegetables and weak opinions about everything else, which made her, as Seong-min pointed out, an excellent person to live with. Their mother had stayed at the guest house through the pregnancy. She had worked where she could. Kitchen work, cleaning, translation, because her Korean had by then become genuinely strong, and there was always someone at the waterfront who needed something translated and had money to pay for it. She had saved carefully. She had been preparing. The twins were born in March. In the hospital, she had held them for the first hour without saying anything, just looking. Song-min had been quieter as a baby. Ji-won had been louder. This, Song-min said, was the first sign of the fundamental difference in their temperaments that remained accurate to this day. Ji-won said that was not accurate. Seong-min said she was correct, and he knew it, and his thoroughness meant that sometimes he was simply slower to arrive at the obvious conclusion, which was not the same as being wrong. They were 6 years old. They argued like this all the time. Park Sung-jin found himself doing something he had not done in a meeting in 12 years. He lost track of time. Their mother, Ji-won continued, had begun rebuilding in earnest after the twins were born. She had started a small food business. Nigerian food, sold at first from the guest house, then from a market stall, then, after 2 years of the market stall, from a small shopfront that she rented on a street that Haja's nephew owned. She specialized in soups and stews and rice dishes that she made in large batches every morning and sold in containers. She had regular customers within a month. Within a year, she had a waiting list. Juliana Williams, it turned out, knew how to work. She had always known how to work. That was one of the things, Park Sung-jin remembered, that he had noticed about her in the beginning. Not because she was obedient, but because she was precise. She did things correctly the first time. She did not require management. Seong-min said their mother had taught them both to cook by the time they were 4. Not as a game, as a skill. She had said a person who cannot feed themselves is dependent on someone else's mercy, and mercy was not a currency you could count on. Ji-won had learned the logistics, the timing, the efficiency. Seong-min had learned the flavor, the instinct, the adjustment. Ji-won said this was because Seong-min was impatient. Seong-min said this was because Ji-won was risk-averse. Park Sung-jin said nothing, but something in his chest did the thing it had been doing since they arrived. A slow, involuntary tightening that he could not fully stop. He asked, "Did your mother ever speak about their father?" The room went quiet. Ji-won said, "She said our father was a powerful man who was afraid of something he could not control." Seong-min said, "She said that fear did not make him a bad person. It made him someone who made a bad choice." Ji-won said, "She said bad choices do not have to be permanent. She said people can change the story they are writing." He said, "But she did not tell you his name." Ji-won said, "She gave us enough to find you ourselves." He looked at Ji-won. That was deliberate. Ji-won said, "She wanted us to arrive by our own decision, not by her instruction." He said, "Why?" It was Seong-min who answered. She put down the second rice cracker she had been eating and looked at him with the eyes that were her mother's eyes, and she said, "Because she wanted you to meet us as people who chose to be here, not as children who were brought. There is a difference. People treat you differently when they know you chose." The food arrived. Warm soup, rice, a few side dishes that the kitchen had assembled quickly. The twins moved to the table and sat, and Ji-won folded his hands and said something quiet before eating, which Park Sung-jin recognized after a moment as a brief grace, the kind Juliana had done before every meal in the kitchen at midnight. Eyes closed, lips moving, quick and private, and then she would look up and pick up her spoon. He watched his children eat. They were hungry. They were trying to be dignified about being hungry, which was something Juliana had taught them. because she was Juliana, and Juliana believed that how you carried yourself in small moments was the real measure. He thought about 5 years. He thought about what 5 years had built in this room, and then a message came through from Ha Jin on the small device in his pocket. He read it once. He read it twice. He looked up at Ji-won. He said, "Your mother has arrived at the gate." Ji-won and Seong-min exchanged a look that contained an entire conversation. Seong-min said, "Is she angry?" Ha Jin's message had included her voice from the intercom. Park said, "She is not angry." He paused. "She is calm." Ji-won said, "That is sometimes worse." Seong-min nodded solemnly. "Calm means she is thinking." Park stood. He went to the door. He said to the guard, "Bring her in." The east sitting room. He paused. "And tell Ha Jin to prepare the main receiving room. Tell him it might be needed." Then he came back inside and sat down across from the twins, who were finishing their soup with the focused appreciation of people who had not eaten since lunch. And he said, "What would you like me to say to her?" Ji-won looked up from his soup. He thought about this seriously. Then he said, "The truth. Whatever the truth is, even if it is uncomfortable." Seong-min said, "Especially if it is uncomfortable." He said, "And if the truth is that I made a choice I cannot take back?" Ji-won said, "Then say that." Seong-min added, "But also say what you are going to do now. The past is what it is. What matters to us is now." He looked at these two children. He said, "How are you this old in 6-year-old bodies?" Seong-min said, "Very seriously, our mother reads to us constantly and makes us explain everything back to her. It is very demanding." Ji-won said, "It is also very effective." Park Sung-jin, for the first time in a very long time, felt something move across his face that was not composed or strategic or managed. He felt it before he could stop it. He felt something that in different circumstances, on a different face, you might have called the very beginning of a smile. Before we continue, a quick note for everyone who loves these Mafia boss romance stories. I've bundled 20 of our most loved Afro-Korean romance stories into the Ultimate Mafia Boss Love Collection. You'll get all 15 complete stories, 20 audiobook versions, plus 5 exclusive bonus stories you won't find on YouTube. If you'd love to enjoy these stories anytime without ads or interruptions, you'll find the link in the description below. Juliana Williams had not been inside the Park estate in 5 years and 6 months. She had not expected to be inside it ever again. She had, in fact, spent a considerable amount of energy building a life that made never returning not only possible, but entirely sufficient. She had a business. She had a home. She rented and was close to being able to buy. She had Heja, who drove her too fast on highways and argued about ingredients, and had been to every school event the twins had ever had, sitting in the front row with a sign. She had what she had built, which was real, which was hers, which no one had given her, and therefore no one could take away. She had the twins, who were, she would say to Heja on evenings when things were hard, simultaneously the best thing that had ever happened to her and the most exhausting thing she had ever survived. And both of those were true at the same time and did not cancel each other out. She had not planned to come here tonight. She had planned to take her children to a community center in Gangnam, where she believed they were following up on a charitable organization they had decided they were interested in, which she had thought was unusually civic-minded of them, but had encouraged, because she believed in encouraging civic-mindedness, and also because she was a woman who ran a food business from 5 in the morning, and by 6 in the evening, she was tired enough that the idea of her children being independently curious about community service felt like a gift. She had been sitting outside in the car for 11 minutes when the call came from a number she did not recognize. A man's voice, calm and professional, who had said, "Your children are safe. They are inside the Park estate. You may come when you are ready." She had sat with the phone in her hand for 30 seconds. Then she had looked at the window of the car and said 3 words out loud that she had not said in front of the children in 6 years. The 3 words were not printable on this channel. Then she had started the car. She was not angry when she arrived at the gate. This surprised her because she had been certain she would be angry. She had been preparing anger the entire drive. She had been assembling it, organizing it into the specific shape of what you say to 2 6-year-olds who have committed a complex multi-step deception to bring you to the door of the man who threw you out in the rain. But by the time the gate opened and she walked through it, the anger had settled into something quieter and more complicated. Something that felt, if she was honest, like the calm before you make a decision you have been postponing. She had been postponing this, not consciously, but somewhere in the back of her mind, where the truths you do not look at directly live. She had known that the twins were getting to the age where this question would become unavoidable. They were too observant, too thorough, too much like him, which was the part that broke her heart a little every time she thought about it. Not because she resented it, but because she loved them for it, and resented him for making that complicated. She followed the guard across the estate grounds. It was still raining lightly. The estate looked exactly as she remembered. The fountain was off, the garden lights were on. She had used to walk this path every evening after her duties ended, back when she had been invisible and content to be so. She was not invisible now. She was a woman who had given birth alone, raised 2 extraordinary people mostly alone, built something from nothing, in a city where she started with nothing, and walked back through a gate she had been thrown out of with her head exactly as level as it had been the night she left. The guard brought her to the east sitting room. She stopped in the doorway. The twins looked up from their soup. Song-min's face did the thing it always did, when she had done something she knew was questionable. Not guilty, exactly. Because Song-min had a complex relationship with guilt that involved a great deal of rationalization, but somewhere in the neighborhood of anticipatory accountability. Ji-won said, "We can explain," she said in the language only the 3 of them shared, the Igbo she had taught them alongside Korean and English, because she believed your mother tongue was not a gift you gave away. You had better. Then she looked across the room. Park Sung-jin was standing. He had stood when she came in. She noticed that. He had not stayed seated in the chair of authority. He had stood. She looked at him. He looked at her. 5 years. He was the same. That was the thing about him. He had not softened. He had not aged into warmth. He looked exactly like the man she remembered. Precise and guarded, and somehow both present and behind glass at the same time. But he had stood. She said in Korean, "I apologize for arriving this way. They were not supposed to come here." He said, "I know." She said, "They have explained themselves, I assume." He said, "Thoroughly." Song-min said quietly and from behind her soup bowl, "We also apologized." Ji-won said, "We did." Juliana looked at her children for a moment. Then she looked back at Park Sung-jin. She said, "I would like to speak with you privately, if you are willing." He nodded. He looked at the twins. He said, "Can you manage for 20 minutes? Ji-won said, "There is more soup." Song-min said, "And we have questions about those paintings." He said, "I will answer them after." Song-min looked at Ji-won. Ji-won looked at Song-min. They turned back to their soup. Juliana followed Park Sung-jin to the main receiving room, and she would tell Hyeja later, much later, that walking through this house again was the strangest experience. Not because it had changed, because it had not. Because every room was exactly as she remembered and she had imagined, in the years since, that she might have exaggerated it. Might have made it larger, or colder, or more impressive than it was. But she had not. It was exactly as large and cold and impressive as she remembered. The main receiving room had a low table and chairs that were intended for guests who were being treated seriously. He sat. She sat across from him. There was no tea this time, which she thought was probably correct. This was not that kind of conversation. He said, "I had you found." She looked at him. "When?" He said. "About 3 months after that night. I commissioned a trace through a private firm. They found an address in Incheon." She said, "I know. I saw the notice." He said, "You saw it?" She said, "Hage's nephew works in building management. He told me someone had been asking about my residency documents. I moved the following week." He looked at her. "You knew I found you, and you moved anyway." She said, "I did not know why you were looking. In my experience at that point, looking for me was not in my best interest." He said nothing. She said, "Did you plan to do something with the address, if you found it?" He was quiet for a moment. "I do not know," he said. "I told myself I only wanted to confirm you were safe." She said, "Were you going to help?" He said, again, "I do not know." She respected that. The not knowing. The honest not knowing was better than a constructed answer. She said, "I want you to understand something. I did not raise them to come here. This was not part of my plan. I have been preparing them for a lot of things. But this, in this particular house, tonight, this was not mine." He said, "They told me." She said, "Then you know they did this on their own initiative. Which means you should know that the people who raised them into children who could do this are not people who spent the last 6 years preparing an assault. They are people who raise children who believe in gathering their own information and making their own decisions." He said, "You?" She said, "Me, Heja, a few good teachers. A lot of arguments about everything, mostly at breakfast." Something almost moved on his face again. She said, "How long have you been in this house alone?" He said, "I am not alone. There is staff." She said, "Staff is not the same thing, and you know it." He looked at her. She said, "I am not saying this to wound you. I am saying it because I need to understand who you are now, so that I can have an honest conversation with you about my children." He said, "Your children." She said, "They are mine. They have been mine for 6 years while you did not know they existed, or while you did not permit yourself to know." That landed. He said, "I deserve that." She said, "Yes." A silence. She said, "I did not come here tonight planning to forgive you. I want to be clear about that. I do not have a tidy ending prepared. I have not been building toward this as a story where everyone reconciles and goes home happy. That is not what life has taught me to expect." He said, "What do you expect?" She said, "I expect what my children told me they came here for. Truth, whatever it is. And then we all decide what to do with it." He said, "Then here is the truth." He sat forward. He did not look at the window. He looked at her. He said, "I was afraid. That is the complete explanation, and it is not a good one. I was afraid of what you and a child would mean in the world I had built. I was afraid of what it would expose. I was afraid that love, and I am using that word because I believe it was accurate even then, was something my world would use against me. So I removed it before anyone else could." She said, "You removed me." He said, "Yes, and I was wrong. And saying I was wrong does not fix anything. I understand that. But you asked for truth. That is the truth." She was quiet. He said, "When they were sitting in that room tonight, when Song Min told me about the paintings and got it exactly right, I felt something I have not felt in a long time. I do not know what to call it. Something like grief. Something like wanting to go back to a specific moment and make a different choice." She said, "You cannot go back." He said, "I know." She said, "But you can make different choices now." He said, "Yes." She said, "That is the question. Not what you should have done. What you are going to do." He said, "What do you want me to do?" She said, I want you to be honest with them, the way you were just honest with me. I want them to hear you say what you did and why, not to punish you, because they are the kind of children who will know if you are managing the truth, and they will not respect a managed truth, and they will be right not to. He said, and after that? She said, after that, we figure out what is appropriate. Carefully, slowly. This is not a reunion movie. These are real children. My real children. And whatever comes next comes at their pace and my pace, not yours. He said, understood. She said, good. Another silence. A different kind. Not the silence of things unresolved, but the silence of things that have been set down after a long time of being carried. She looked around the room. She said, your house is very quiet. He said, it usually is. She said, that must be strange when you are used to other things. He said, what do you mean? She said, Song-min and Ji-won are not quiet at all. Even when they are quiet, they are thinking very loudly. You can hear it in the room. The thinking. He said, I noticed. She said, how was that for you? He said, very quietly, it was the least alone I have felt in 5 years. Now if there is anyone out there who has not subscribed to this channel yet, please stop right now and subscribe, because what is coming in the next part of this story is the moment that will stay with you. This is the emotional peak. Comment below and tell us what you would do if you were in Juliana's position right now. Like the video so we can keep making stories like this for you. They walked back to the east sitting room together. Not side by side exactly. Not yet. But not separately either. Something in between. The twins looked up when they entered. Seong-min assessed the mood of the room the way she always assessed the mood of the room, with her eyes doing a fast sweep that was so fast it looked like she was simply looking forward. Then she picked up her cup again. Ji-won said, is it resolved? Juliana said, we have started. Ji-won said, started is good. Starting is harder than continuing. Park Sung-jin looked at Ji-won for a moment. He said, who told you that? Ji-won said, my mother. Park said, she is right. Sung-min said, she usually is. She said it completely without irony. As simple fact. Juliana sat down. Park sat down. And for a moment, the four of them were in a room together, and nobody said anything, and it was not uncomfortable, in the way silences are uncomfortable, when things are unresolved. It was the kind of silence that happens when a room finally contains everything it was supposed to contain and is adjusting to the weight. Seong-min said, you said you would answer questions about the paintings. Park looked at the painting on the wall, the landscape. He said, my mother chose that one. She bought it at a gallery in Incheon when I was about your age. She said it looked like a place where nothing bad had happened yet. Song-min looked at the painting seriously. And the other one? He said, I chose that one. 10 years ago. Song-min looked at the abstract painting. She looked at him. She said, yours is trying too hard. He said, I know. Ji-won said, you should get a different one. He said, what would you recommend? Ji-won thought about this with genuine seriousness. Then he said, something that does not feel like it is explaining itself. Park said, that is a good criterion. Ji-won said, our mother's shop has a painting above the counter that a customer gave her. I like it. It is of the Incheon waterfront at low tide. Park said, does it explain itself? Ji-won said, no, it just shows what is there. Park nodded. He looked at Juliana. She was watching her children with the expression she wore when they did something that reached her in a way she was not going to announce in front of witnesses. He recognized it because he had seen it once before, years ago, in the kitchen at midnight, when he had laughed at something she said. A real laugh, not the controlled kind, and she had looked at him exactly this way, like someone finding something they had thought was lost. He understood now why she had kept coming back to the kitchen. He understood, sitting in this room with his children and their mother, that she had not been chasing him. She had been recognizing something, and she had been right to recognize it. The thing she saw was real. He had buried it very efficiently, but it had been real. Seong-min yawned. It was enormous and complete and entirely undignified, and then she looked slightly embarrassed about it for exactly 1 second before arranging her face back into composure. Ji-won looked at her. Seong-min said, "I am not tired." Ji-won said, "You yawned like a seal." Seong-min said, "I did not." Ji-won looked at Park Sung-jin. "She yawns like a seal. Every time. Since she was a baby. Our mother has a recording." Juliana said, "I do not have a recording." Ji-won said, "She has a recording." Park Sung-jin looked at Sung-min, who had arranged her face into the expression of someone who was absolutely not yawning like a seal and never had, and something in the room shifted permanently, because he laughed. Not the controlled kind, not the small movement around the mouth. A real laugh, short but real, the kind that comes out before you can organize it. The twins stared at him. He cleared his throat. He looked at the table. Seong-min said, carefully, "That was the first time you have laughed since we arrived." He said, "Yes." Song-min said, "You should do it more often." He said, "I am told this." Song-min said, "By who?" He said, "No one, actually. You are the first." Song-min nodded, as if this confirmed something she had suspected. She said, "Then you have been spending time with the wrong people." It was past 2 in the morning when Ha-jin appeared quietly in the doorway and looked at Park Sung-jin with the expression of a man who had seen many unusual things in 12 years of this work and was still slightly uncertain how to categorize tonight. Park looked at him. Ha-jin said quietly, "The children are falling asleep." He said it as though reporting a security situation that required management, which, in a way, it was. Song-min had listed to one side against the arm of the sofa. She was not asleep, technically. Her eyes were still fractionally open. But her assessment of the room had slowed considerably, and the hand that had been holding her cup was now resting in her lap, and the cup was on the table. Ji-won was sitting straight, as he always sat. But his eyes had a soft, unfocused quality that meant his extraordinary mind had finally decided it had gathered enough information for one evening and was beginning the process of shutting down for maintenance. Juliana looked at her children. She said something in Igbo, low and quiet, the 2 syllables that meant something like "come back," and Seong-min's eyes focused again, and Ji-won straightened, and they both blinked at the room as if locating themselves. Seong-min said, "I was not asleep." Ji-won said nothing, which was more honest than saying he was not asleep either. Juliana said, "We should go." Park said, "It is late. The roads are wet." He paused. He was aware this was the most domestically careful thing he had said to anyone in years. "You are welcome to stay. There are prepared rooms." Juliana looked at him. He said, "I am not making a demand or a request. I am offering." She said, "I know the difference." She looked at her children. Ji-won had not fallen asleep because he would not permit himself to fall asleep in an unfamiliar location until he had categorized the location as safe. This had been his system since approximately age 3, and Juliana had tried to explain to him many times that not every room required prior threat assessment, and he always listened respectfully and then continued to assess prior to sleep. She watched him do the assessment now. She could see it in the way his eyes moved around the room one more time. The exits, the guard position, the face of the man across from them, which Ji-won looked at last and longest. Ji-won looked at Park Sung-jin. He said, "Are we safe here?" It was a direct question, the kind of question that only a child or someone with nothing left to lose asks directly. Park Sung-jin looked at his son. He said, "Yes." Ji-won said, "You are certain?" He said, I am certain. Ji-won nodded once. He said, then we can stay. Ha-jin moved immediately, with the efficiency of a man who had already prepared for this possibility. Because 12 years with Park Sung-jin had taught him to prepare for possibilities that had not been announced. 2 rooms were ready in the guest corridor. Quiet, warm, doors that locked from the inside. Juliana took her children down the corridor. At the doorway of the first room, she turned back. Park was standing at the end of the hall. She looked at him for a moment. She said, "Thank you." He said, "They are welcome here." She said, "I know that now." She went in. The door did not close all the way. She left it fractionally open, the way she always slept when the twins were small. One ear always toward the hallway, always listening. Park Sung-jin stood alone at the end of the corridor for a long time. He thought about what Ji-won had said. Are we safe here? He thought about the fact that the question needed asking. He thought about what it meant that a child who was half him had grown up needing to ask that question, had grown up in a world where the answer could not be assumed, and that this was a thing he had made true by the choice he had made 6 years ago. He went back to his office. He did not try to work. He sat in the chair and looked at the document on his desk that he had been reading when Ha-jin first came to find him, which already felt like it had happened in a different century. He thought about what Juliana had said. What are you going to do now? Not what you should have done, what you are going to do. He sat with that for a long time. Then he opened a drawer in his desk. In the back of the drawer, behind documents that were filed and organized and exactly where he had placed them, there was a small photograph. He had not put it there intentionally. It had arrived in an envelope 3 months after she left, sent to his business address through channels that should not have known his business address. And inside the envelope, there was nothing but the photograph. A photograph of Juliana at the estate, taken in the garden during the summer before she left. She was not looking at the camera. She was looking at something to the left, something outside the frame, and she was laughing. The real laugh. The full-faced one. He had not known who sent it. He still did not know. He had reasons to suspect, but no proof, and he had, by the standards of his world, the most efficient means of finding out if he chose to use them. He had not chosen. He had kept the photograph instead. He looked at it now. He put it back in the drawer. He did not sleep that night, but it was a different kind of not sleeping. Not the kind where you lie in the dark and your thoughts run the perimeter of everything you cannot fix. The kind where you sit and you make decisions. The quiet, irrevocable kind. The kind that stick. By the time the sky outside the estate windows began to lighten, he had made 3 of them. In the morning, Seong-min was the first one up. She appeared in the kitchen at 6:15 with her hair slightly askew, and the look of someone who had slept excellently and was ready to resume operations. She found Park Sung-jin already at the kitchen island with coffee. She looked at the coffee. She looked at him. She said, "We are not allowed coffee yet." He said, "You are 6. She said, "I know. Our mother says the brain does not need additional stimulation at this age. She says our brains are already working at a level that concerns her sometimes." He said, "She is right." Seong-min said, "Are you making breakfast?" He said, "I was going to call the cook." Song-min considered this. She said, "What time does the cook arrive?" He said, 7. Song-min looked at the clock on the wall. She looked back at him. She said, "That is 45 minutes. He said, "Yes." She said, "Can you cook?" He said, "Adequately." She said, "Adequately is not the same as well." He said, "No, it is not." She said, "I can make eggs. Our mother taught me. I can do it properly, not just scrambled." He said, "What else can you do?" She thought about it. "Rice, if the cooker is set. Soup, if there is broth already made. Fried rice, if there are leftovers from yesterday." He said, "There is broth." Seong-min moved to the refrigerator. She opened it and stood on her toes to see the upper shelves. She said, "Do you have spring onions?" He said, "Probably." She said, "You need to know what is in your refrigerator. That is basic." He found the spring onions. They made soup together. And Seong-min and Park Sung-jin in the kitchen at 6:30 in the morning, with Seong-min directing the process with the confidence of someone who had made this soup before, and Park following instructions with the attention of someone who understood that doing this correctly mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with the soup. Ji-won arrived at 6:45. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at the scene and did not say anything for 3 full seconds. Then he said, "You are making soup." Seong-min said, "Obviously." Ji-won said, "Who taught him the ratio?" Seong-min said, "I did." Ji-won looked at Park. He said, "She is strict about the ratio." Park said, "She is precise." Ji-won said, "That is a good word for it." He came in and found a seat at the kitchen island, the same island where his parents had first sat across from each other in a kitchen at midnight 6 years ago, and accepted the glass of barley tea that Park had already poured, because he had noticed the night before that Ji-won drank barley tea and not the juice that Seong-min preferred. Ji-won noticed that he had noticed. He wrapped both hands around the cup. He said, "You pay attention to small things." Park said, "I try." Ji-won said, "Our mother says the small things are the large things in a different size." Park said, "She is right about that too." Ji-won said, "She is right about most things. She would tell you she is wrong sometimes too, but that is because she is honest, and honesty requires you to admit when you are wrong. She is very thorough about both." Park said, "Like you." Ji-won thought about this. He said, "I think I am thorough from her. And from you, probably. I do not know yet which parts came from where." Song-min says the stubbornness is from you. Park said, "What does Song-min say comes from your mother?" Ji-won said, "The cooking, the fairness, the way we see things." Park said, "And the arguments?" Ji-won said, "Song-min says the arguments are from both of you." Park looked at the soup. He said, "She is probably right." Juliana arrived in the kitchen at 7. She stood in the doorway exactly as she had once stood in the doorway of his office, with her eyes taking in the room completely before she committed to entering it. She saw her children at the island. She saw the soup on the stove. She saw Park Sung-jin with a dish towel over his shoulder, doing something she could not have predicted in any version of last night she had imagined. She said, "Who made soup?" Seong-min raised her hand. Ji-won said, "He helped." Juliana looked at Park Sung-jin. He removed the dish towel from his shoulder. He said, "The ratio is correct." Seong-min supervised. Juliana said, "I see." Seong-min said, "He is better in the kitchen than you said." Juliana said, "I never said anything about his kitchen skills." Seong-min said, "You said he lived alone. I assumed." There was a beat. Then Juliana said, "That is actually fair reasoning." She sat down. Park poured her tea. She accepted it. The 4 of them ate the soup that Song-min had directed and Park had assisted with, and it was good. Not just adequate. Good. After breakfast, Park Sung-jin asked Juliana to walk with him. She agreed. The twins stayed in the kitchen with Ha-jin, who had been discovered by Song-min to have a surprising knowledge of traditional Korean card games, and who had been drafted into teaching them before he had fully understood what he was agreeing to. The estate gardens were wet from the night's rain. The air was cold and clear, the way Seoul mornings can be in the winter, sharp enough that you feel it in your lungs. They walked along the stone path that circled the fountain. He said, "I have been thinking about what you asked, what I am going to do." She said, "And?" He said, "I am going to step back from the business. Not immediately, there are arrangements that take time, but I have been working on a plan for the past 2 years to legitimize the remaining operations, Last night accelerated my commitment to that plan. She said, I am not asking you to change your life. He said, I know. I am telling you what I am choosing. She said, why? He said, because I spent last night thinking about G1, asking if he was safe here. And I decided that if these children are going to have any kind of relationship with me, and I want them to, I will not have them in a world where that question has a complicated answer. She said, that is a large thing to change. He said, yes. She said, and you are certain. He said, I have been running toward this for 2 years. Last night gave me a reason to run toward it faster. She walked beside him in silence for a moment. Then she said, I need you to understand something. My children are not a motivation for you to perform change. They are real people who will know the difference between real change and performed change. If you are going to be in their lives, you have to be genuinely different, not strategically different. He said, I understand. She said, do you? He said, Juliana. And the way he said her name was the same as it had always been, careful, with a weight that could not quite disguise itself. I am not performing anything. I have been alone in this house for 6 years. I chose that. I chose it because I convinced myself that the thing I removed was a complication. Last night, I met the complication. And the complication is extraordinary. And everything I believe about what matters, every honest thing I have ever told myself, tells me that the choice I made 6 years ago was the worst one I have ever made. She stopped walking. He stopped too. She looked at him. The cold morning light was even and clear, and there was nowhere to arrange his face into something different from what it was. She said, I am not going to tell you that we can go back. We cannot. He said, I know. She said, I am not going to tell you that forgiveness is immediate. It is not. He said, I know. She said, but I am standing in this garden talking to you, and my children made soup with you this morning, and Seong Min told you that you should laugh more often. Those things are also true. He said nothing. She said, we will take this one day at a time, very slowly. And the children set the pace. Not you, not me, them. He said, I agree. She said, and you are honest with them. Always. Whatever they ask. He said yes. She said, good. She started walking again. He walked beside her. After a while she said, the soup was good this morning. He said, Seong Min's instruction was very specific. She said, she always is. He said, she told me my refrigerator organization is inadequate. She said, she is right. He said, she said, that was a fair characterization. Juliana smiled, just slightly, the kind that does not ask permission. He saw it. He did not say anything about it. He simply walked beside her and felt the cold morning air and thought about all the things that had happened in one night in this house, and what they meant, and where they led. When they came back inside, Ji-won was sitting on the floor of the main hall with Ha-jin, learning a card game with the intense concentration of someone who intended to master it before lunch. Song-min was at the window looking out at the gardens with an expression that meant she was planning something. She turned when they came in. She looked at her mother. She looked at Park Sung-jin. She said, did you resolve more things? Juliana said, we made a start. Song-min said, starting is harder than continuing. Park said, your brother told me that. Song-min said, our mother says it. He just says it more often. She tilted her head. Are we coming back? The room went quiet. Juliana looked at Park. He said, to Seong-min, if you want to. Seong-min said, we would like to. Ji-won did not look up from his card game. He said, we discussed it last night. Seong-min said, when we were not sleeping. Ji-won said, we were still awake at midnight. Park said, what did you decide? Ji-won finally looked up. He said, we decided that the story is not finished, and that leaving before you understand something does not mean you understand nothing. It just means there is more. He looked at Park with those eyes, those undeniable eyes. We want to understand more. Song-min said. Also, the paintings need replacing. Park said, I will take recommendations. Song-min said, we have some. He said, I expected that. Juliana watched this exchange. She watched her children negotiate the terms of a relationship with a man they had known for less than 12 hours, doing it with the precision and the fairness and the thoroughness she had spent 6 years building into them, doing it with the intelligence that was hers and the strategy that was his and the particular combination that was entirely their own. She thought about the night they were born, about the hospital in Incheon, about the hour she had spent holding them both and not saying anything, just looking. She thought about Haeja, who would need to be called, and who was going to have extraordinary feelings about all of this. She thought about the morning they had woken her up at 4 years old, by standing silently beside her bed in the dark, both of them, waiting for her to notice them, because Seong-min had said they should not wake her, and Ji-won had said they could not wait, and Seong-min had said they could stand there instead, and it had been, she had said to Haeja afterward, the most alarming and also the most them thing that had ever happened. She thought about the walk she had just taken in the garden beside a man who had made the worst choice of her life possible, and who had said I was wrong without any performance, without any cushioning, without any attempt to make the wrong thing sound less wrong than it was. She was not ready to call that enough, but she was willing to call it a beginning. Because Juliana Williams had built a life out of beginnings. She was very good at beginnings. She knew what to do with them. Before they left, Song-min stopped in the east sitting room one more time. She looked at the paintings, the sentimental landscape and the abstract that was trying too hard. She said, to the room in general, the one your mother chose should stay. It is good. The other one should go. Park said, and what should replace it? Seong-min said, something true, not something impressive, something that just shows what is there. He said, like your mother's waterfront. Seong-min said, yes. She turned and looked at him. We could bring one from the shop, one of the customer's paintings. The woman who gave it to our mother said it was hers to do with what she wanted. I think our mother would say yes. He said, ask her. Seong-min went to ask. Park Sung-jin stood alone in the east sitting room for a moment. He looked at the painting his mother had chosen. A place where nothing bad has happened yet, she had said. He had not understood that when he was 5. He had not understood it when he was 26, and running this estate, and convincing himself that strength meant never letting anything in. He understood it now. Some things are not about what has already happened. They are about the possibility that what comes next can be different. Not fixed, not perfectly repaired, not pretending the past did not happen. Just different, just open, just the possibility of something being made from what was not made before. Ha-jin appeared in the doorway. He looked at his employer, who was standing in the east sitting room looking at a painting, which was not a thing he had ever looked at in 12 years of employment here. He said, cautiously, are they leaving? Park said, yes, for now. Ha-jin said, are they coming back? Park looked at the doorway where Seong-min had just been standing with her assessment of the paintings and her plans for replacement and her absolutely unshakable certainty about everything she believed. He said, yes. Ha-jin nodded. He did not ask anything further, but something in the set of his shoulders as he walked away told Park that 12 years of observation had given his head of security a very clear picture of what had changed in this house tonight, and that whatever he privately thought about it, whatever surprise or calculation it involved, he was choosing, in this moment, to simply let it be. The car that took them back to Incheon was one of Park's. He had offered. Juliana had looked at the offer for a moment and then said yes, because Song-min was half asleep against the window before they even got to the gate, and Ji-won would not sleep until Sung-min did, and it was a long drive, and she was a woman who made practical decisions. As the car pulled out of the estate, Ji-won looked back through the window. He looked at the gate as it closed. He said, without turning around, "Did you tell him about the seal yawning recording?" Juliana said, "There is no recording." Ji-won said nothing. Seong-min said, from behind closed eyes, "There is a recording." Ji-won said, "I knew it." Juliana said, "Go to sleep, both of you." Seong-min said, "I was not." Juliana said, "Seong-min." Silence. In the quiet of the car, with the wet Seoul streets moving past the windows and her children finally sleeping in the back seat, Juliana looked out at the city she had rebuilt her life in. The lights reflected on the wet road. The same rain that had been falling the night she left was finished now. The sky was clearing, the kind of clearing that happens just before real dawn, when the dark is not fully gone but the light is already beginning to decide. She thought about what she had said to Park in the garden. One day at a time. Very slowly, the children set the pace. She thought about Sung-min, saying the story was not finished. She thought about 6 years of beginnings. She was good at beginnings. She looked at the clearing sky. Some choices do not disappear with time. They grow. They become children who find addresses and research security protocols and ask questions that hit like stone. They become truths that knock on your door in the rain at midnight because the rain does not care how long you have been pretending the past is gone. And then you have to decide, not what you should have done, what you are going to do. Park Sung-jin had said he would be honest with them. Always. She believed him. She would watch. She would see. And if the honest thing turned out to be real, they would all figure out together what the story looked like when the people writing it finally decided to be brave enough to write it true. Outside, Seoul moved on around them, enormous and indifferent and full of people beginning things every single minute of every single night. And the car carried them home through the clearing dark, and the twins slept, and Juliana breathed, and somewhere behind them in a house that was very quiet and very large, a man sat in his office and did not look at documents and did not make calls and did not manage anything at all. He just sat, and for the first time in a long time, the quiet felt like something other than being alone. Please like this video right now. Share it with someone who needs to hear a story about what happens when the past stops running from you and walks up and knocks on your door. Subscribe to this channel for more stories that stay with you long after the screen goes dark. Drop a comment below and tell us what you would have said to those twins at the gate. Tell us where you are watching from. If you enjoyed this story, imagine having 20 more unforgettable Mafia boss romances ready to read or listen to whenever you want. That's exactly why I created the Ultimate Mafia Boss Love Collection. Inside, you'll find 15 complete stories, 20 audiobook versions, and 5 exclusive bonus stories that aren't available on YouTube. You can get instant access through the link in the description. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.